Yes, what's up? This is Warzone Jones back again, MMA topic video. Now I want to talk about how I got into MMA. I want to talk about the first time I got into MMA. Now, when you first get into MMA, let's be honest, you don't know shit about MMA. You don't know nothing. You don't know nothing about it necessarily. You may have some idea of what you think MMA is because of what you heard or maybe something you've seen on TV, but you really don't know nothing. So that's how I started off with MMA. I didn't know nothing about it. Now, when I first saw some type of MMA fightings in the UFC, it's basically because of Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock was in the WWE. He came to the WWE around 1997, and they wanted to build him as the world's most dangerous man. They wanted to build him as that. So what they did was they would show old fight clips of him fighting in the UFC. Now, at the time, I didn't know what UFC was. I didn't really understand what it was. All I know is it was two guys fighting in a cage. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what's this? Is this the real pro wrestling? Because, two guys fighting in a cage, that's, equivalent to pro wrestling. That basically, pro wrestling, two guys in a cage, that was the only thing I can really think of as far as, two guys fighting in a cage was pro wrestling. So they would show fight clips of Ken Shamrock fighting in the, in the cage. He fought in the UFC. He was the world's most dangerous man. He was tough. He was beating everybody. Of course, they didn't talk about him losing to Royce Gracie, but they was talking about all that stuff he did in the UFC. And they would show fight clips of that every now and then. So that was basically, I would say, my introduction to like MMA or to the UFC. But they didn't really explain a whole lot of what it was, a style versus another style. They didn't really explain that, but they didn't need to. They was just showing Ken Shamrock looking tough. But it wasn't until the UFC did the Ultimate Fighter TV show, and they put that show on a pretty good time slot. That was after Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw was a huge show. It's a huge show. It still is a huge show for pro wrestling fans. So it gets a lot of ratings. So once that show went off, the Ultimate Fighter reality show comes on. Tough one. This show was amazing. It was a really good show. If you didn't know nothing about MMA, this was the perfect time for you to try to learn about MMA and get into the show. So, this is when I was learning about MMA. Now, I'm seeing things like grappling, takedowns, guys laying on top of each other, just keeping them down onto the ground. I didn't like that at first. I thought it was boring. I thought it was really, really boring that guys would do that. So I didn't like that at first, because at first, I really didn't like MMA at first. I wouldn't say I wouldn't like MMA. I didn't like that aspect of MMA, taking guys down to the ground, because a lot of those guys wasn't really doing nothing. But as the season goes on, I'm becoming a fan slowly. I'm slowly becoming a fan because of what these guys do in the house. They was acting crazy. They was being pretty entertaining. So eventually we get to the end of the show, and we get this amazing fight between Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner. These guys tear the house down. They put on a really, really, really good fight. Now, this is the fight in MMA that Dana White says that changes MMA. It elevates MMA to the next level, because as these guys were fighting, the ratings were steady spiking up. They were steady spiking up, and I can understand why, because these guys were beating the hell out of each other. It was a really entertaining brawl. Forrest Griffin wins this fight. It changes Forrest's life. It changes Stephen Bonner's life. It changes both their lives. Hell, they both got a 6-figure contract in the UFC. So it changes their lives. So naturally after this, I want to see more and more and more. And I'm just steady learning more and more about the UFC. I'm learning about their stars. I'm learning about their legends. I'm learning about Chuck Liddell. I'm learning about Randy Couture. I'm learning about these guys. I'm learning about Pride Fighting Championship. How there's this other organization over there in Japan. I saw Rampage Jackson, in Pride. He fought Chuck Liddell, and I thought when these two guys fought each other, I thought that Chuck was going to beat him. Because, you know, I didn't know nothing about Pride. I didn't know nothing about Quentin Rampage Jackson. I didn't know nothing about him at all. I didn't even, nothing. So I assumed that he was going to lose because, well, I knew Chuck Liddell. I saw him on the Ultimate Fighter TV show, and a couple of fights I saw a couple of his fights. But Chuck Liddell got smashed. And then shortly after, Rampage comes to the UFC, and then he smashes him again. This time he smashes him for the championship title belt. So Rampage Jackson might be the first guy who I actually became a fan of, like really became a fan of, who I was just, you know, like supporting and wanted to see do well. You know, other than like Rashad, because I was rooting for Rashad, you know, in the Ultimate Fighter TV show. I was basically rooting for him because, you know, he was the black guy of all the other white guys. You don't know if y'all ever heard those jokes about a black guy being in a house full of other white guys on reality TV shows. So, yeah, that's basically the reason why I was rooting for Rashad. But I thought he was a good fighter, though. And hell, he was. He became the UFC champ, you know, after the end, and a really huge star. So the Ultimate Fighter reality show is the reason why I became an MMA fan. At least one of the reasons. You know, I became a really huge MMA fan because of that. And it was different. It was different. They did martial arts. I love martial arts. Just in case anybody doesn't know, you know, I got a black belt in Taekwondo. Where's my black belt? I wish I could show you, but I don't have it right here right now. So, yeah. MMA, it's cool. It's real cool. It's great. You know, the biggest combat sport in the world, at least to me it is. To me, MMA is the biggest combat sport in the world, and they can only get bigger. And I guarantee you that they will. So that's how I got into MMA. Just wanted to share my thoughts with you, you know, about that. So this is What's on Jones. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to my channel. Click that subscribe button. I guarantee you won't get a ticket if you click it. I'm out. Deuces.